Okay. Carson Wentz has been traded. Jalen Hurts' Dynasty action plan. We've got Dynasty trades to discuss, plus the quotes from the Shark Pool Dynasty Trades Forum of the week. Welcome to the Footballguys Dynasty Show. I'm your host, Chad Parsons, joined by Jordan McNamara. And let's get right to it, not pull any punches. Jalen Hurts is currently, Jordan, the number one most traded player on my fantasy league platform. That's not surprising to me. When you get a giant change, and frankly, I thought it would be interesting to even discuss if this is a giant change. You know, some people thought Jalen Hurts, and specifically in Superflex, was going to have value, was going to be the week one starter, and that Carson Wentz was going to be untradeable. I remember listening to, the money, the economics of football. This, we heard there was podcasts that he will not be traded, that they cannot take this hit. Yet they found a buyer. They were able to trade him. They were able to get a conditional second that could easily turn into a first back. But I think Jalen Hurts' super flex value is the biggest discussion point here, because now you have a giant leapfrog in valuation from Jalen Hurts, was it late second, maybe even third, drifting into the third round sometimes of rookie drafts a year ago. He had a 4-game start sample size this last year. Fantasy-wise, it was fine. He's running around. He's making a few plays here and there with his arm. I wanted to break down that a little closer here after I pass it to you. But we've got a lot of things to discuss, because Carson Wentz now, you project him as a week one starter, which you didn't have that assurity before with the Colts. And we can see if he can maybe replicate a lot of what Rivers did. And then you have Jalen Hurts, where it's going to be all over the map. But I think a lot of people are going to have him in the top 15.
Yeah, so I was really interested from the Jalen Hurts angle of this. It looks like we're tracking some real draft position, right? So you're getting up to date relatively in the past week or so. We have some drafts that are going that are live right now, so we have some information about where he's going. He has been going quarterback 12 in Superflex end of the fourth round. Is where his median has fallen. And in the past week since the trade, it has bumped up maybe like 4 or 5 spots in terms of his overall position, and it hadn't moved at quarterback. He's still quarterback 12. So I think a lot of this was baked into his price, right? I think that Carson Wentz was going to be traded was baked into the Wentz price, or was baked into the Hurts price. So I'll say that as a threshold thing. For Hurts, when you look at this offense last year, both of the quarterbacks weren't very good in terms of passing. Wentz, the problems have been well documented. Hurts was a good fantasy quarterback, but as a passer, left a lot to be desired. When you look at some of the advanced metrics like completion percentage over expectation, and those sorts of stats, right? And points added at passer, those more advanced stats, there's questions there. As I sit here right now, I think the biggest takeaway from this is you can't do this on Jalen Hurts. You can't go at that price, because the risk is too great that they're going to draft someone. Right? They're going to be sitting there. They're probably going to be sitting there dead red in the first round, looking at quarterback 3 or 4 of this class. And this is a team that addresses the position a lot, right? So that's a question that I have about his value. And we tend to not see it. We don't tend to see a lot of longevity for second round quarterbacks. Right? This tends to be a high pedigree position. And so that would be my overall concern.
Yeah, the good quarterbacks typically don't slip, right? And yes, there's exceptions. We have day 3 exceptions, we have day 2 exceptions, but the point is they're exceptions. And you have to be really careful, because day 2, I would argue day 2 is probably the biggest area, the biggest bucket of quarterbacks that, you figure, they didn't go in round 1, they slipped a little bit to round 2 or round 3, but look at this profile. They don't get a lot of allegiance. And round 1, you get a lot of perks contract wise, and generally, where do they go? They go top 10, top 12, top half of the round. You typically don't see guys slip into the 20s, and if they do, they typically slip for good reasons, with rare exception. Or you see someone get traded into, like Lamar Jackson style, to get maybe a 5th-year option, something like that. But typically, those guys maybe are but viewed by consensus to be day 2 guys that end up, a team ends up going up to get one of those guys. So there's generally a have and have nots. But for Jalen Hurts, I know it's a small sample alert, so we can put that asterisk on this, but what has he done so far? And I thought this was pretty telling. Again, we're going with probabilities here. Could he bust through outlier status? Absolutely. Could he end up being a lot of things are in play. And I want to separate fantasy from NFL for a little bit, because fantasy, you get points for that, but you still need the stability of you're a multi-year starter. Like, we don't have a lot of concerns that a cross section or maybe even half the quarterbacks in the NFL that they have multiple week 1 projected starting seasons in front of them, if not more. Jalen Hurts has that not at all. So when he starts fantasy wise, I'm pretty sure he'll be a top 16, top 18 projection. Why? He runs a lot, but that doesn't translate. And that's why I kind of wonder, 3, 4, 5 years from now, is Lamar Jackson a starting quarterback? If he's still, not really up to a high enough level as a passer, Kyler Murray, so these are the 2 prototypes to me that are still very much getting by on, look what they're doing rushing wise. Look how great this is. Yes, it's great. But at a certain time, you're going to need to pay the bills. NFL, you're going to need to drop back in timing, in rhythm, and consistently enough, and deliver and move your team down the field with chunk and big time plays as a passer. So unless the whole NFL prism is being changed, and unless, teams are okay and building around different skill sets, that's how you butter the bread. That's how you pay the bills. So for Jalen Hurts, again, 4 games that he has gone through so far. And I do want to point out that he was below average. I love looking at Pro Football Reference because they have adjusted passing. And it basically looks at all these different various categories. Shout out to them. And compares them to the NFL average, which is 100. So obviously, if you venture down to the 90s or the 80s or be below average. And if you're up in 110, 120, 130, et cetera, you're above average in the category. From sack rate, interceptions, touchdown, adjusted, yards per attempt, all type of stuff. Below average in every single category last year. So again, 4 game starts. He had other throws in other games, but below average across the board. The biggest thing, completion rate, 52%. So and this is someone that when I watched him at the Senior Bowl, again, he's got to see it to let it loose. And if he doesn't, he's kind of thrown on spec, let's call it. 52%. I looked at quarterbacks in their first 4 starts that threw at least 80 passes under 55%. And here's the rolling list. Stop me, Jordan, when I get to a quarterback that is notable in Superflex Dynasty leagues. We've got Ryan Finley, Brandon Allen, Jake Luton, Dwayne Haskins, Nathan Peterman, Josh Rosen, CJ Beathard. We're back to 2017 now. Tom Savage, Mitch Trubisky, Deshaun Kaiser. First one, you could make that argument, Jameis Winston in 2015. What I would point out is one of those 2 guys was 101 in the NFL draft, and his name is not Jalen Hurts. Then you got Ryan Lindley, Andrew Luck, again, 101. There's going to be a lot more allegiances than a day 2 pick. Brandon Whedon, Caleb Haney. You go all the way back. Tim Tebow is on this list. We're back like a decade now. So if you're betting on Jalen Hurts, and again, 4 game sample size, I get all that. But the point is, I hate the outliers like this when the cost is prohibitive. And I would say the cost is prohibitive with Jalen Hurts because it's meaningful. It's a meaningful pick. So you choosing, and what I always like to say to people, when you choose, every day you choose not to trade a player. So if you have Jalen Hurts right now and you are not at least exploring the market, moving up or back, for a player plus, or moving up and packaging him together with something, you are actively choosing to not trade him. Just because someone doesn't come to you does not mean you are my hands are tied. I had to hold Jalen Hurts. You have to be out there beating the pavement, going around door to door, knocking on doors. Because I guarantee of 11 other league mates, someone's interested in Jalen Hurts for a reasonable sell price that I think in 12 to 24 months is going to look like you just found money. And don't let a week 1, he runs for 120 yards. If that ends up occurring, being like, oh, well, I lost this deal. Because I think Jalen Hurts is one of those longer range bets you need to make, and it's not dependent on September of 2021.
Yeah, I'm with you. Can I give the pro Jalen Hurts passing argument? The pro Jalen Hurts passing argument is he was one of the best quarterbacks in terms of play action. He had the biggest difference between being a play action passer last year and being a non-play action passer, right? Those two stats, it's the biggest difference in terms of guys that did 100 dropbacks or more. And then you look at the percentage at which he did it, it was less than 20%, right? And you could say, all right, like let's go with a more play action based approach and really sort of maximize what he does. I think with the changing offense, right? That would sort of be the pro case that I would have. Again, I don't think that this is typically a decision that you're going to see a team make, is to roll with this guy. And one of the things, we see this all the time. We see it with Dak Prescott. We see it with Gardner Minshew is a pretty good example of this, right? The threshold for low pedigree guys to get over, right, and to be long-term players is really high, right? It is Prescott level, right? The Kirk Cousins really slow start is such an exception to the rule. And we sort of looked at, you can look at Minshew as another example of this. It wasn't horrible, right? It was when you sort of look, right, he was better at the beginning of his career when Nick Foles was out for that. He was better than the average that Nick Foles had in his entire career. And they gave Nick Foles the job back, right? So that is one of the things that when you look at these jobs, they historically don't go to guys that are low pedigree. And almost the Dak Prescott case is he was elite and everything kind of went his way, right? That's the formula. And I struggle to see that with Hurts. And again, they're sitting dead red on a quarterback in that range. And they can move up. They've shown an aggression to do that. This seems like you're holding a hand grenade with a pin pulled in it right now. If you're not sort of capitalizing on this move, that would just be my thought on it. I would at quarterback 12, right? And there's a lot of different ways you can pivot. You can pivot up, you can pivot back, right? You can pivot. There's a lot of swings that you could do with him. You could go to a guy who's a lesser value, but more secure, someone like Stafford or Cousins or Matt Ryan even, or you could go up the board and use him as a package piece to go up the board. I think you have multiple ways that you can go. You could use them to combine them with a pick to move up the board that way, right? You could do all of those sorts of things. I think that there's a lot of optionality that you have, and I think there's going to be interest in the market to do it. You just got to get creative in how you want to sort of attack it.
Yeah, I think they're probably unlikely. You've been centering on the NFL draft, which I think is the right mindset here, that they're probably not going to make a big splash in free agency. But like you said, they're in a perfect spot to be one of the top 4 quarterbacks, to be in that zone. Like you said, they could be moving up, to get their QB 2 or 3. And the moment that happens, Jalen Hurts, his value goes in what? A third? I mean, and because if you move from, QB 12 to 24, that's not moving half in value. You're going a lot lower than that. It moves geometrically, it doubles, his positional rank doubles. That means that's a lot worse for your market value. And I love what you said about being open to both directions. And there's always discounted veterans. Who's got the tarnish to their shine? I mean, right now, I was able to get deals on Deshaun Watson in Superflex over the last few weeks, Russell Wilson. And what's the common theme between those two players? For various reasons, they have some tarnish for what's going to happen with them going forward. I don't think, it's a hard ask to say, oh, they're not going to be starting quarterbacks in the NFL anymore. I mean, let's be realistic. What's most likely to happen is that they're both week 1 starters. I mean, maybe Deshaun Watson holds out, could it get ugly? But it doesn't take away the fact that he's still a proven entity in his mid-20s with a strong profile. And Russell Wilson, he's gotten to the point sometimes where he's venturing down closer to QB 10 or so. Is it really going to be that much more costly to move from, a few spots down in perception or market there with Jalen Hurts way up here, in his general valuation curve and arc, and then Russell Wilson reaching lows of since who knows when? So if you can kind of capitalize on that, and I really think this is a super flex decision. I mean, the lower stakes of one quarterback make it, you can be quasi transient at quarterback if you don't have one of those guys, and if you're not an elite team and saying, I'm going to go out and buy Mahomes or Josh Allen or, one of these 3, 4, 5 guys that probably move the needle most seasons more than not, and actually moves it in a, that threshold of 10 to 12 quarterbacks. So, lower stakes, but I think in Superflex, you're just doing a disservice to go out there and ask. We're mentioning a bunch of names of profiles. I'm sure at least one of them appeals, to most people listening. So, what if you think it has to be moving up, and if you move down to a Matt Ryan, that's just not good use of a real flashy prospect that could hit big. If that's the sort of dialogue, then that's okay. Try to move up though, and try to look for those teams that, and especially, if they're a team that maybe they want to get younger, maybe they are looking to extend their window. I think it's pretty funny. It's sort of it's actually doing the opposite, I feel, because, it's like, oh, I got Kirk Cousins, I got to extend my window, so I'll trade him for Jalen Hurts, because so, and I think it's funny because you be kind of look in this world of like quality years remaining, or, like projected starting years or starting opportunities left in a lifeline. So it's kind of funny when, I think it was a different discussion with someone this week where it was like Nick Chubb, who is 25, and then it was like some older player, and I thought to myself, and I was like, I think their number of starts or quality weeks remaining, it's probably about the same, even though the other player is much older. It might have been some 29-year-old wide receiver, and I'm like, you can, every position functions differently, and I just find it interesting when folks assume raw age, or 22, 23-year-old wide quarterback, definitely better than 33-year-old quarterback. They've got to have more time left. Well, even if you're playing percentages, like we said, I mean, Hurts might not even be the starter this year, let alone 2022.
Yeah, as you were talking at the board in terms of guys that were coming after him, what's your thoughts on who would you have straight up more NFL starts for the rest of their career? Jalen Hurts or Jameis Winston?
See, I say Jameis Winston, even though you don't even know, because again, 101, right? 101 gets chances. I think there's a reasonable chance he's the Saints starter, and it's for the whole year this year, but he's going to get more opportunities. Just like, again, Mariota kind of did his time. We'll see if he gets feature opportunities, but these guys that have been productive in the past, I think people don't realize that, yeah, you gotta crawl through the mud. It's kind of like a Shawshank Redemption style, right? I mean, the path to get the freedom, the path to get to I'm starting him in my lineup and I feel good about it. It can be a year, it can be 2 years, but they circle back. Ryan Fitzpatrick, you cannot slay them like it's a zombie movie. Like they will keep coming after you. So yeah, I think it's important to follow pedigree, follow guys that have had enough production with the starts they've received previously, and those are the guys that end up circling back in their quote unquote retreads again.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. There's just so many ways to pivot. What's your thoughts on what this does for Wentz?
Well, I think the fact that the uncertainty goes away, for starting this year, I mean, that's obviously, it extends the window, even if and I know I'm talking to an audience meaning our recording booth, that is not pro Wentz. I understand that, but they are in on Wentz for this year. Jacob Eason is not really applying pressure, depth chart pressure. And when you say, what's the fit? The previous regime with the Eagles that he actually had success, he had his best seasons with, was Frank Reich. They acquired him in my sense, a meaningful trade, because probably as long as he's healthy, the odds are you're giving up a first round pick next year and you're giving up a third. And for what people thought that they would have to surrender because of the cap implications, no one really thought that was probably in the works for Carson Wentz. So I think all that is a positive. And I think you get him with a strong run game. You get him with the offensive line. I think the weapons are a little bit underrated. I think they could use improvement across the board with maybe a lead alpha type. Don't think they have that. Sorry, Michael Pittman. But yeah, I think all those things, this gives him his best shot. So I think, and we actually talked about this in the Footballguys chat, that the first one to step out with a projection was sort of in that mid-teens, of sort of where would he be for a season-long projection for 2021. And I think that's appropriate. Someone in, QB 15, 18, something like that. And I think Superflex, that firmly keeps him on the map. So again, I'm more pro Wentz, and I had Wentz ahead of, Jalen Hurts before this trade, but obviously having clarity of Carson Wentz starting, only supports that, that more starts remaining in their career, Wentz greater than Hurts.
Isn't this pretty damning though? I know you said it's a meaningful trade. The more I'm thinking about it, I'm just looking back at my list of quarterback trades. So I've been tracking this because I think it's going to become more relevent.
He brought out his yellow legal pad.
I got my yellow legal pad here with
that's why you need to watch the show, because Jordan pulled it. I literally saw him flipping through. He's on like page 9. He's like, quarterback trades, got it.
There's copious notes in here. There's those notes.
Are there any other types of notes?
I don't even need to go back the 10 years of quarterback trade notes that I have. The
Who was
cost
traded
for Matthew Stafford. The cost Matthew Stafford 2 weeks ago. Right? I mean, that is
Are we debating indictment. Stafford is better than Hurts? Please, let's not start there.
Not Hurts, but Wentz. I'm saying.
Oh, right? sorry, Wentz. Are we saying that Wentz is better than Stafford? No one's saying that.
12 months ago, people were saying that.
Start with someone else. Who else was traded for a first?
Sam Bradford was traded for a first. Ended up being
he was 101, and that guy has plenty of arm talent. He's just made of sickle sticks.
Mm-hmm. Bradford was traded for Foles and a future second. Alex Smith for Kendall Fuller and a third. A second for Alex Smith.
I said
kind of looks like. It's kind of like what it looks like right now. A second and a third. A second and a first for Carson Palmer. And I think we're going to see more, right?
You mean Carson Palmer, who Greg Cosell says is one of the finest throwers of the football when he's talking about prospects. That Carson Palmer is one of the ideals as a pocket passer.
Yeah,
that guy got it. He was traded for a second and a third, in his last life of the NFL.
No, he's traded for a first and a second.
Oh, sorry, first and second.
Yeah.
So there you go. Again, one of the finest throwers of the football. So
yeah. I go back to this.
It's not good. No, this isn't good, Jordan. This isn't good. I understand what you're saying. He's at a reasonable cost, if he does work out, that the Colts benefit. So there is benefit because he's not going anywhere close to top of the market. So if he ends up starting a couple years for him, I think that's going to be a win trade-wise. If they can reclaim, his value and how he can work within an offense. I will say he has some advantages with the Colts that the 2020 version of the Eagles did not provide him. I think they're going to stick with the run game. I think their defense is better. I think their offensive line is better. I think they're going to focus on the things he does well. So let's see what that does. Obviously, he's going to be in a more comfy environment with maybe a surrounding staff that likes him. I don't know.
Maybe they have a hand holder.
Maybe a professional. We talked before the show. Like if you made X amount of money, would you just have someone drive you everywhere? So this is sort of the same thing. Like, will we have someone that prepares Carson Wentz's uniform? And again, when you get to a certain level of prestige and importance of role, you don't really want to busy yourself with all of the the things that kind of go ancillary to your work. And I totally get that. So Carson Wentz, if they have a lot invested in him, they're like, what's that first round pick? Let's get someone that makes $50,000 a year, and they just take care of Carson.
He needs to hire a yes man, right? Just someone to follow him around, tell him he's doing great.
You're doing great. Doing great. Great throw. Great throw. You almost hit him that time. You got closer. That was good. I like what you did there. You might not want to dive head first again. No, that's not a good idea. No, you're not that fast. No, don't reach the ball out like that. No, that's not a good idea. Brass tacks. Do you think Carson Wentz moved much off of this that you would be trying to sell, or do you think the time to sell would be getting much closer to the season and getting into the season when he's actually starting?
I'll say I'm a little. I think the window that he's in, that you kind of debate it, right? He's in the Kirk Cousins, Derek Carr, Matt Ryan, Jared Goff tier. Like, I'd much rather have Jared Goff. I think I'd much rather have all of those guys. But we'll see what it does to his value. It's close enough that you could say like he's on the back end of that tier. And if he's sort of on the back end of that tier, you're collecting. I think it's a good shot at a quarterback 3, right? If I was going to put together a startup draft plan and I say, hey, I have 2 guys that I kind of like up at the top and I feel good about it. Or maybe I went early and I have, I don't know, one of the top 5 guys, and then I got someone, whether it's another top 10 guy or something I feel really comfortable with as a quarterback 2, and he's on the board at quarterback 20 or so. And when you factor in rookie picks or all those things, I think that's an interesting spot to go after him. I wouldn't trust him as a quarterback too. That wouldn't be a threshold that I feel comfortable with. And one thing I would think is interesting is pairing him with another guy that has outs, right? So if that's Mariota, if that's Winston, if that's Taysom Hill, right? Pairing him with guys that have potential to be starters this year as well, and sort of leveraging the two of them. That would be a place where I would find value in going after Wentz. I don't trust him as a quarterback too in Superflex. I definitely don't trust him there.
And for transparency, I'm at QB 22 in my rankings. So it's not like I'm overly, it sounds like I might be right around, kind of the high variance, where it kind of makes some sense for you as well. I will say when you get to about 18, 19, 20, I mean, the landscape changes. It doesn't look as rosy as it does 12 months ago. So you pretty much need to start putting into that zone, like you said, guys that have a window in front of them. I mean, does Ben Roethlisberger have much of a window? So that, I mean, that's, to me, that's a lot riskier than, Carson Wentz, or you want to take shots, like you mentioned with, Jared Goff, you want to take shots with, Jameis Winston, or these guys that you might be able to, Mariota, you might be able to find something there that previously was there, even if it was multiple seasons ago. So I think that's important to know that that's where you're going to have to live in the 20s. And that's why you probably want to get a couple quarterbacks in a startup draft environment in Superflex before you get to, QB 22, something like that. Cause it gets a pretty windy, curvy road, and there's potential black ice. So if you're looking for that QB2, you might be shotgunning things at that position in that spot. Unless you get 2-3 dart rolls, like you said, that can go there. This is Chad Parsons, Jordan McNamara, episode 43, the Football Guys Dynasty Show. Reminder to subscribe, rate, and review Football Guys on all your podcasting platforms. You can sign up for that Football Guys daily email update delivered from Joe Bryant, your daily news. And again, the offseason, these next couple of months, you're going to be hearing periodically from Joe Bryant, but you want to sign up. Make sure anything that hits, we got free agency coming up, footballguys.com/free. Let's talk about some dynasty trades, Jordan. Again, this is where the rubber hits the road for the marketplace of player value. We get to talk about team composition, ways to go about selling the best player, potentially buying the best player or asset of a deal. Obviously, about half of these are FFPC. That is a format that is highly active, and about I think it's 2-3 weeks from now, we've got the trade and cut down day, done, where you have to cut usually 4 or 6 players from your previous roster positionally. So we've got Adam Thielen and Kenyon Drake for DJ Chark and a future third, so one quarterback here. And the main discussion point would be the difference or lack thereof, we'll see from Jordan here, on Adam Thielen and DJ Chark. Chark is definitely one of those hot players right now, viewed to take a big uptick, projected to take a big uptick with Trevor Lawrence coming into town in Jacksonville. But DJ Chark, I think, is a little riskier than maybe the market is.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think the assumption that Trevor Lawrence is going to come in and make him a lot more valuable. We've had the Trevor Lawrence discussion. One place I typically don't like to bet on rookies quarterbacks is early, and depending on a rookie quarterback to just boost up the value of everyone, that's a little probably a bridge too far for me. I would take the Thielen Drake side of this. I think Thielen has clearly the better quarterback right now, and Drake has upside over a third. So if you're sort of comparing them, Thielen and Chark are kind of close. Drake, I think, has upside over the third. So I'd take that pretty comfortably.
Yeah, I feel like Drake's a wild card that might be able to hit, and that I was going to ask you, I mean, who's more likely to put up 2 top 18 seasons from this point forward, Thielen or Chark?
Thielen.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would be on the other side. Like, oh, well, I'm trying to sharpshoot a top 5 season out of DJ Chark. Like, I think that's pretty unlikely. And the risk that he puts up 0 top 18 seasons is a whole heck of a lot higher for Chark than Thielen.
I will
shallow
say,
roster. So
yes, I will say I've seen people put Laviska Shenault over DJ Chark. That's a really bad bet. Historically, that's a terrible bet. So that would be my thought there, just as a side note.
Yep. All right. We got Jalen Hurts in the crosshairs. We talked about him a little, so we'll add a couple bullet points here. But FFPC Superflex, Jalen Hurts for 109 and 208. Is this enough, Jordan?
You're sitting there let's just do the math on this for a second. Is that 2 running backs? Let's say it's Najee Harris, Travis Etienne, and 4 quarterbacks. You think 4 quarterbacks are gone in the top 8 picks?
Maybe at least 3.
I think that's kind of your debate point. I mean, then you have Kyle Pitts, right? I'd probably take the pick liquidity. I think the market's going to go up on Hurts, but I would probably take the pick liquidity because I think I could get a better quarterback. If I package 2 of those together, I could move up 2 spots and get a top 10 quarterback. And that's a much better bet. So that would be my play.
Yeah, especially if you can bank it right now. Like, let's say you're shopping Jalen Hurts, and I'm not going to say that there's this big, like, the end of February, all the value drops out, but we may be seeing more mock drafts for late April that include the Eagles doing things, moving up, taking a quarterback at 6. You might hear more of that talk. And it doesn't, I would say in your specific, little universe of 11 other GMs, if only 2, 3, 4 of them are really interested in paying this type of price for Hurts, if 1 or 2 of those get scared off. So I wouldn't really, this whole, like, you look at gift horse in the mouth, right? You take a bird in the hand. You might think you can get, I can get 105. I can get a little higher. I want to get 110 and a future first. Like, you might have things like that dancing in your head, but I think you take this because, like you said, doing the pick math, right? Even if, I'll tell you this, if I get QB4 off the board, in my if that's a worst case scenario, but if that doesn't occur, I get wide receiver 3 or Kyle Pitts in FFPC or running back 2. I'm taking all of those things over Jalen Hurts. And I think you just look back 12 months from now and laugh if that happens. Like, I think so just take the pick. I know it sounds kind of low. You're like, wow, if he's QB 12, 13, 14 in Superflex, how is he not worth more than 109? I get it. But I think you just, if it's high risk, you got to be willing to lower the bar if you've already explored a little bit.
Can I ask you a question? And I've seen this narrative pop up, and I'd be interested in your thoughts on it. That you should, if you're a contending team, you should at the whatever price that you would want to pay to trade Jalen Hurts away, you should keep him as compared to on a rebuilding team, you should trade him. Do you find any value or wisdom in that?
Good word choice. No, I think if a player is a sell, I think here's the one exception that if you have a sell player, that if you have someone who's literally bridging the gap, like I was remembering, a Wayne Gallman in season, right? And he's really important right now. Like, let's paint a picture that it's week 8, and you're kind of making a push. Maybe you get a bye. These next couple weeks are pretty important. And the best you can get is like 212, or a third and some other player that's a backup running back. Like, yeah, maybe you don't sell right then. But I think universally, if a player's a sell and you say this is a risky profile to hold at this price, you kind of got to be out. You got to look at the best use for your team. So I think Jalen Hurts' team direction shouldn't really, I'm really dying at quarterback. Well, then why don't you trade him for a quarterback? Why don't you trade him? Right. We mentioned with 109 and sort of be thinking if one of these 4 quarterbacks is there, I'm going to be interested and I might take him here. So you can still this whole thing about I got to hold a guy because of a certain position. Maybe there's some argument in your lineup in season, depending on the price point and the level of the player and what they're doing. But in the off season, you've said this before, right? I mean, freaking do the good work for your team, do the good work for your roster and your overall team value, and worry about who's my QB2? I'll have nothing but, I have Kirk Cousins and nothing at quarterback. Well, figure out the nothing part between now and whatever. Don't think in February it's Jalen Hurts and that's my QB2 and that's my answer, so I can't trade him.
Yeah.
All right, we got a big boy deal alert, Jordan. So this is stock PPR, Saquon Barkley on the move, and for Justin Jefferson and Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
This is a big boy deal or a big gal deal, depending on.
Someone is going to probably feel really bad about this in a year or two.
Yes. I mean, my heart wants to take the Barkley side and smash. I see the wisdom to the other side. I think Jefferson, if he were to take a player that is young at wide receiver and say, give me your best case for 101 or wide receiver 1, it is Justin Jefferson. And that is over DK Metcalf. It's over AJ Brown. It's Justin Jefferson. So if you're saying, all right, this is my wide receiver 1, and then you're getting Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who, again, doesn't have the ceiling of Saquon Barkley, but has a pretty solid floor profile over the next 3-4 years in terms of the first-round running backs that hit in year 1. That's a pretty lucrative profile going forward. I see the wisdom in that side. It would hurt to trade Barkley. If I was getting this offer, I could see the wisdom in it, but I'm not sure I could pull the trigger being on the other side, just because you're giving up a player that is very high upside and still within his prime. Problem is we haven't seen that in 18 months. Right? That's kind of where the rub is, right? So I see the wisdom in this trade. I see the wisdom in this trade from the other side. I'm interested in your thoughts on it.
Yeah, you were kind of poking around. And I think part of that is, I'm one of the biggest Barkley guys out there, right?
Yeah.
So that's, and I'll tell you this, I'm not going to hem and haw as much as you. I'm saying I think you got to take the Jefferson side.
Wow.
And I love Barkley.
Okay.
I love Barkley. Because I'll say this, you've got 2 guys that sort of hit the thresholds you want as 21-year-old rookies, right?
Yeah.
And so Barkley, let's call him mid-prime, right? 24 years old. Generally, you have 2 buckets, right? You got the early prime, 21 to 24, 24, 25 to 27 is sort of that. But when you get to 27, 28 for a running back, yes, elite guys can go past there, but we'll see. So I think you got two big throws here that if Edwards-Helaire posts in the next couple of years, like a top 4, top 5 type season even, or just a couple top 10 seasons, I think you win this trade really easily because I think Jefferson's floor, and like it's really tough projecting, but when a guy basically pulls a, quasi Odell Beckham type stuff in year 1, I mean, what else are you looking for? So this is absolutely, I am reticent to trade Barkley anywhere, but this is the type of thing. Give me 2 profiles like that, and I'm on board. And I think, could you lose this? Could Barkley throw this in your face as a big time talent that can basically do whatever he wants if he has a decent situation around him? But we really haven't seen the massive Barkley season yet, right? We haven't seen him put it all together, and we kind of blame the Giants a little bit, right? Who's to say we don't blame them, the Giants? So I just, obviously if he had a great offensive line, great situation, maybe paired with a great quarterback, we might feel differently about this. But I think, Jefferson plus a piece like Edwards-Helaire, and I think you got to do it. I think you just have to. Insulation-wise, if Barkley gets hurt again, what's happened to his value?
Yeah, it's amazing.
He's not insulated, right? He's not really insulated that much
anymore. It's amazing he hasn't fallen. It's amazing that he has not fallen. Right. Just look at, all you need to do is look at Michael Thomas, and you look at Saquon Barkley, and has that not happened yet? Again, for half of his career, he has not played. Right? I think that's the games, or pretty close to that, after missing basically all of this year, and he was limited with the high ankle sprain before that. Let me ask you a question. One way I think about these, especially the big person trades, the large pieces trades, how do you, if you're looking at it from your side, how do you lose it? And sort of as you were talking, I kept thinking this: if I take the Jefferson and Edwards-Helaire deal, how do I lose this? And I think that there's less answers than if you take the Barkley side, right? Because with the Barkley side, there's a lot of ways that can go really bad, including he falls in value. There's a lot of problems with the Giants. You have a lot more outs on the other side. You just have a lot. It's like poker, right? You've got a straight draw, you got a flush draw, whereas Barkley, you're sitting on top pair, and you're like I got to dodge 2 cards. That's kind of how I feel about this. The more you sort of talk through it, it's really tough to be on the. It's tough to not see the Jefferson, Clyde Edwards-Helaire side and really.
Well, yeah, if you get, I paint it this way. Obviously, you've got 2 profiles that you like. So you kind of need both of them to roll snake eyes to truly get crushed, right? If Barkley goes back to, 2 warp type stuff, you can still overcome that between the 2 other players. Mm-hmm. But if Barkley, and sort of the last thing I said, if he gets hurt at his 24-year-old season, 25, the air brakes come off a little bit in terms of creeping away value. Like you said, I mean, he's been kind of quizzically and rarely, a rare air of insulation for, what's kind of transpired with him since very early in his career, and sort of an untouchable rookie 101 and stuff like that. But another season like that, and you flip the card to 25 and having maybe the same amount of questions, if not more, about durability and availability, and are we going to see that? And then you get the age component with running back coming in, and then you still have over here 23-year-old Edwards-Helaire at that point in time, 23-year-old Justin Jefferson. And even if Jefferson was like wide receiver 14 this coming year and Edwards-Helaire was running back 14 or something, you still have plenty of insulation, and well, look what they are going to do or did do already. So yeah, it feels like you have, like you said, more outs, more ways to win. All right, now, strap up. We've got stock format 101 traded for Davante Adams 208 and 308.
So I'm working on my scale of urgency, right? And there's run grandmother over on the way to accept, right? To get to the computer to accept. Then there's run the kids over, right? I got to sort of hierarchy these things. This is pretty high on the go smash the computer and accept the Adams side. Right. That'd be my thought.
Well, the one thing I was going to point out with this trade is that even if it's super flex, that selling 101, you typically don't want to do it early. You want to kind of wait at least for the NFL draft to transpire. Ideally, maybe you're closer to on the clock, if not on the clock. But that's really post NFL draft when people get the starlights in their eyes of who am I going to draft with 101? What running back, maybe got into the late first round? What was the landing spot? Or, wow, can you believe, Jamar Chase or Devonta Smith went this high or whoever it is that, but if you can transition to a player like Davante Adams this early, that's where it makes sense. But like you said, you kind of have to have a run to the podium, run to accept sort of feel to the trade. What I say is if it takes you more than like 10 seconds where you blink and refocus your eyes and make sure you're seeing it correctly, unless you have that, you're best probably to have more patience. And like if you do the whole, well, I'm going to sleep on it, see how I feel tomorrow, that's probably not the trading off of 101 deal for you. And it's probably not the right one to make because it's so early. Let it build. Let it build. You got the pick either via trade or you earned it struggling through a horrific season. So get all the way. Enjoy the whole process of holding that I can draft anyone card.
So I think Davante Adams is your wide receiver 1, correct?
Yes.
So you have you're getting the wide receiver 1 plus for the stock pick that is going to go much later than Davante Adams in the draft. Right. That is just
hopefully a running back goes round 1. Yeah, the best case. Because if it's a wide receiver, can I tell you one thing that floored me? I could not believe when I started poking around with just other rankings out there, general consensus, all that type of stuff. I really like Jamar Chase, and yet I'm below market on him in terms of the hierarchy of wide receivers. I don't know. I stacked up the board and I was like, there's all the top 18 or so, top 18 wide receivers. It's a really tough group to get into. And the fact that Jamar Chase is 4, 5, 6 guys inside that line, I mean, I really like him as a prospect, but to me, it's like, I can't understand having him that high for a guy that even if he ends up going top 5 in the NFL draft, I mean, they still don't hit as much as people want to believe. And, as tightly as they think it's like bulletproof. And again, he's close to that for a prospect, but he's still a prospect. And I just think there's a lot of guys that are 27 and under where it's like, really, you can bank some stuff. And like, so now, I mean, if they're viewing this as Jamar Chase or just that's what that conversation brought up is just that I couldn't believe that I like Chase within the rookie class quite a bit. And the fact that I'm apparently bearish on him in aggregate in the Dynasty wide receiver marketplace, I was like, whoa, I can't believe I'm apparently in a void. If Jamar Chase were in a startup draft by name, apparently he'd be on my avoid list.
Yeah.
All right, let's do one more since it involves Jalen Hurts, and you're going to like this one. FFPC Superflex, Chris Godwin, Jalen Hurts for DJ Chark again, Allen. I almost said Alex Rodriguez. Aaron Rodgers and 207. So one more time, that's Godwin and Hurts for Chark, Aaron Rodgers, and 207.
You put A-Rod, and that's I usually put Aaron as the abbreviation for him, and that's I mean, it's smash Aaron Rodgers, right? That's would be my thought. And I know that the market loves themselves some Chris Godwin. I tend to be a little bit more skeptical. There was a moment in time, again, go back to the Barkley thing for a second. There was a moment in time where Chris Godwin was the wide receiver one in Dynasty. And again, we've cycled through 24 guys since then, but and it was only 18 months ago. But that is just the move from Hurts to Aaron Rodgers is. It almost doesn't matter with the wide receiver. You're getting Chark in a mid-second. That's fine. That's plenty to make up for the difference between him and Godwin.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the discussion in the Shark Pool on this trade was focusing on Godwin. And I think that's not the right approach. I think the key part of the trade is FFPC Superflex. You don't get a lot of extra roster spots. So if you can really have a nice tight 2 or 3 quarterbacks, that's what you want. So you're moving from Jalen Hurts to Rodgers, where you can now have a nice tight quarterback room, right? That could save you a roster spot, which you can churn through and try to hit big with the waiver wire perpetually in season. That could be flip guys that you could turn into a second. You get another guy, you flip for a second, and all because you're not feeling like you have to hold Jalen Hurts when maybe he goes back to a backup in week 6. Do you cut him? I don't know. But so I think play a little more arbitrage of Godwin versus Chark. I mean, Chark might be the wide receiver one for his team. What if Godwin goes back to Tampa Bay, or is he really a number one going somewhere else? These are questions you should have. Yes, he had one great year, but there's a lot of variables on, is he going to be someone that strings together wide receiver one seasons? So yes. I think you got to be a little more flexible. And the key part of this is Aaron Rodgers. And I think people are focusing too much on wide receivers here.
When you get in Superflex, I've noticed this, and this is a using NBA trades as a strategy in Dynasty. But in Superflex, when you get the opportunity to get an elite quarterback, you got to look really hard at doing that. And this is one of those ones you can't let Chris Godwin get between upgrading from Jalen Hurts to Aaron Rodgers, right? I mean, that is what you were doing if you're taking the opposite side of this. You just can't do that. You have to you get the elite piece, right? They make a difference.
Yeah, and some examples. I remember about 3 years ago. I mean, people were giving away Drew Brees in Superflex. I mean, that's just printing money, right? I mean, every year he plays, it's printing money. Tom Brady over the last 12 months acquiring him. Even if you acquired him right after he goes to Tampa Bay, 2-year contract. You say, well, you're worried about age erosion or retiring and all this stuff, but I mean, talk about, a 20-year sample size of a guy that's proven he can play, and he goes to an all-star team. I remember, other older players that you can't discount them when they get to an older point because, again, Aaron Rodgers last year, we said, sort of like Leonard Fournette the year before, Aaron Rodgers going in the 4th or 5th round of Superflex drafts last off season. And I know that seems a long way away. Somehow he was able to rise in value, which is almost unheard of for a quarterback of his age. And so it's like, well, either he's going to continue throwing 25 touchdowns or he's going to actually show he's Aaron Rodgers. And sure enough, I mean, he goes back to sort of what you expect. And that pick looks like a genius, but it's not magical. You're betting on profiles and you're betting on an all-time player that gets to an all-time low state for one reason or another. So Rodgers is one of those. And again, I think the consolidation standpoint, but like you said, getting some cornerstone guys at critical positions for the format is really key. All right, let's finish out with
reports of Aaron Rodgers' death have been greatly exaggerated.
Pull that obit. Keep it on standby over there on the old file cabinet top. All right, quotes from the Footballguys Dynasty Forum this week. So we're going to get Jordan's reactions, got some spicy ones this week. I view Drake, and I thought this was applicable because we talked about Kenyon Drake earlier, and I know your affinity, Jordan, for Kenyon Drake not being valueless. I view Drake as pretty useless for any team, backup for the rest of his career.
That's pretty valuable. Even if that's true, that's pretty valuable. You got a 2-way guy who can catch and run. But
if he is a backup,
being weird in Arizona, that's fine. I don't think he's. That's fine. That's if that's true, if he's a 1 injury away guy, he's going to be one of the most valuable ones in the league.
Right. Leonard Fournette was technically for a cross-section injury away, right? Look at the run he went on. I mean, so these guys with track records of multi-year, especially NFL starterhood, and they go to Latavius Murray will be the calling card for this, right? I mean, some people have T-shirts with Latavius Murray-esque things on them. So
logo, baby.
There you go. Got a logo about the high variance nature and the appeal of guys like Latavius Murray. So he's a good example.
Jerry West.
I think people get confused sometimes of, if you don't like a running back's price, and, again, I didn't like Latavius Murray when he was valued how he was, the starting running back for the Raiders. You know where I loved him? When he fell through the floor, and I got him for like 4th round rookie picks and stuff like that, because he's behind Dalvin Cook, and now behind Alvin Kamara. That's when I love guys like Latavius Murray. Yes. All right. Regarding Superflex, at 103, you are guaranteed to get a high quality quarterback prospect.
You're not guaranteed to get a high quality quarterback prospect at 101.
That's what I was pitching up on the old T-ball stand there for Jordan. Yep. And what my point was going to be, why do you have to think quarterback at 103 in a super flex rookie draft? The answer is you don't. How about you just think of it as an asset right now?
Yes.
In FFPC, each player is largely either a difference maker or a roster clogger.
I do think in the short rosters that you should, the high variance, right? The stars and scrubs, I do think that's valuable. So I think we tend to maybe speak in a little bit too much extremes, but I think that that's probably getting it to more than thinking about your 18th round pick as a 4-year keeper, right? I mean, that's the wrong side of it. So
we're in a 35-man roster that may be closer to true.
Correct.
Yeah, I was going to say, if any format that is true, FFPC would be the one where you're trying to acquire more auto starts, more core guys, improve your top 8 to 10, let's say, maybe 11 or 12, but everybody else, recycling, can I hit, how much upside is there, and still keep reassessing what that viability is for said roster spot. JD McKissick is waiver wire fodder. I wouldn't give any pick for him.
He wasn't waiver wire fodder in season. If you're going to get him as a throw in, the question is what is it going forward? Is that how that offense can't look like that again? Almost, it couldn't by accident look like that again. So that's the thing I would caution about his long-term value. There isn't a high amount of density in the running back receiving. I call it the Theo Riddick role. James White has been an example. Danny Woodhead has been an example. Haven't really been a ton about Darren Sproles. Those are kind of the generational guys of that sphere. There's been a lot of other examples. Roy Holu, you go back, JD McKissick this year. There's been a lot more of those examples. I don't think he's necessarily roster fodder, but I do think he's more of a throw-in in trades than he is like a second-round rookie pick, for example.
2 more. You can thank the proliferation of sites desperate for content telling us Sam Darnold is a buy high in Superflex.
A buy high?
see, this whole sentence was confusing to me. So there's a proliferation of sites, I'm unaware of this, desperate for content, and their choice to proliferate content is to say Sam Darnold is a buy high in Superflex. Unpack.
I love this segment. Let's see. Let me be careful how I answer that. What's fascinating to me is the big media's obsession with Sam Darnold. I think that's what's interesting. I can't speak for what other fantasy sites are saying or that sort of stuff, but there are very big name media people that are all up in Sam Darnold's business.
People should be throwing first-round picks and all these things straight at Sam Darnold, who's actually approaching the end of his rookie contract.
Yeah, this is 3 years, so he's got one. They're gonna have to exercise on him, and I believe now is it now guaranteed if they exercise it? That might be $16-18 million over 2 years. It's not. It's kind of Mariota where Mariota's money is right now. That's probably not horrible. Don't quote me on the exact numbers. That's close to a range. I don't know, man. It looks a lot you get quarterbacks at this point in their career who haven't done it, and there's PFF and other people have done this analysis. It's updating based on what we know now. It don't look good. It doesn't look good. And basically the benchmark for a quarterback that doesn't hit for a top 12 seasonal finish in their career is 50 and a quarter starts. We're getting there this year. I don't know exactly how many he has. He's been hurt and all that other stuff, but it's not as long of a leash as people give it credit for.
Yeah, I go back to the 90s and, a non-101, top 16 quarterback entering year 4. It's never happened. The first time you hit the top 12. So Darnold, you can make whatever storylines you want for what has and hasn't happened with the Jets. The point is, look at, black and white paper. You're betting on something that hasn't happened. If you think he's going to somehow jump out, whether it's via a trade, whether it's still with the Jets, whatever, and he ends up being QB 10 this year, next year, just know that's never happened. So you're betting on a guy that everything is pointing the opposite direction and you're swimming upstream. So yeah, the buy high, like if anything, it should be a buy low. But yeah, the NFL, just be throwing picks at Sam Darnold when you're actually, if he works out, you're gonna have to pay him a lot sooner than, just draft a guy. Just reset the clock and don't get a guy that's all scrubbed up and dirty, by sitting around and not doing positive things for 3 years. All right,
you think they should absolutely take a quarterback at 2 for the Jets?
Yes, but I was also the one that said Washington, instead of Chase Young, should be taking a quarterback at 2, even though they had Dwayne Haskins. And I know that was very hot takey, but it wasn't a hot take. I am of the ilk that unless you see overt positive indicators for the future, even if they don't come in and pull a Justin Herbert, unless they do that, your biggest problem is you have 2 really great quarterbacks on your roster, which very rarely does an NFL team ever have that problem. I think the Patriots thought they had that problem with Garoppolo, right? And to some degree, of NFL starter viability, they did. They had a second-round quarterback that they thought could play. They still had Brady, but they traded Garoppolo for a second, right? Or something, second and something else. But the point is kind of what they paid. So if you have 2 good quarterbacks, let them figure it out. Favre and Rodgers. You can, if you have 2 quarterbacks, I don't think that's as big of a problem as people have. The biggest problem is having 0. But 0 good quarterbacks is a massive problem. So I would just keep taking. So if you don't for the Dolphins,
looking again, at you, Miami.
I'm not, if you don't, they pulled Tua, they put him in and then they pulled him. Fitzpatrick is nice. He's a great story. But if you draft a guy like Tua, who a lot of people thought could be the number 1 quarterback of that class, whatever class it was going to be, where he was coming out, he had that sort of level of intrigue. You don't put him in, out of your lineup. I'm sorry. When he's ready, you put him in, and that's sort of your move, right? You just kind of go with it. So if you have if you're up high in the draft and you have the chance to take one of those 4 quarterbacks, or in a given year, whatever that top tier is, you just keep taking, is my opinion. And if that means you trade Tua for a second next year or whatever, because the other guy worked out great, then if that's worst case scenario, so be it. But yeah, I would just keep taking, because unless you have a guy and what we have stats, right? Basically once you pay a guy an inordinate amount of money, they don't win Super Bowls. So you have a window with a rookie contract where if you get it right, you have 2-3 years where you can spend everywhere, go like Toys R Us shopping spree around that quarterback that's really good. That's your window. That's your best window in the NFL. So, Patrick Mahomes might test that theory, and he might be the one guy that can sort of break that trend. But all right, we got one more here. And this is going to really tickle our rookie draft bones here. So this is referencing having 14 picks in a 6-round draft. And these are, if you're unfamiliar, Jordan, these are called Zealots leagues, which are like old school Dynasty. They're like 50, 60 roster spots, IDP. I don't know if they're contract. I don't know if the actual original Zealots are contract, but basically they're giant IDP leagues. They've got offense and stuff, but again, very deep, and they're long-standing back, I think, into the 90s and stuff. I think this is too many draft picks and a waste of resources unless you can use these to make other deals happen. Going into a 6-round draft with anything more than 8-ish picks is too many. It's good to acquire, but optimizing the value by using them to move up and consolidate is really the best thing.
Especially at that depth, there's nothing. Part of the value of picks is that they have flexibility. So if you're on the clock, right, you can move back, you can move up, you can do all sorts of other things in the draft. I don't think there's ever having too many picks. I've never had a situation happen where I felt like I had too many picks.
Have you ever passed a pick in a draft? Have you ever gotten to like 502 of a draft that's 5 rounds and you're like, I tried to trade it for a future 4th or a future 5th and I couldn't do it? Have you ever literally passed?
The closest I think I came was last year, our draft together. We had, I think it's 4 or 5 rounds. At the end of that draft, we had a bunch of picks. We were really trying to move a future pick.
Didn't we trade like 506 for a future 5th or something? We did some maybe, like 1-to-1 thing where we were like, we're out on roster spots right now, so we won't even make one. Yeah. Or 5. It was like, but we traded 1-to-1 for a future round.
Okay.
But there's like 60-man rosters, 55, 60-man rosters. I'm not going to say you have to, but I think it's within reason, unless you're a really strong team, you could make all those picks. I'm not saying it's optimal to do so, but that's a quarter of your roster. Let's say it's a quarter of your roster. Let's put the equivalency of like you're making 7 rookie picks in a 28-man roster. That's happened. In a 20-man roster, that's an FFPC, right? Like, so if you have a 20-man roster, that's making 5 picks. That ratio kind of sounds like it could happen. So yeah, I mean, you're probably not going to make them. You're probably going to move up, maybe trade some for future picks. And yeah, that probably is the best way to maximize. And you've talked before about, hey, if you have 3 rookie picks in a row, it's probably not optimal to sit there and just pick 3 players because the value in your board, within your tiers and letting other people take non-target players, all these things, it's not going to align. But having them is not the root of the problem. The problem for most people is not having enough of them, or trading them away, not for the proper value or too early or things like that. But you might end up making 10, 11, 12 of these picks, and that still is optimal. It's a long draft. IDP makes round 4, 5, 6 pretty valuable as well. Offensive players drop down. So no, that in of itself, I don't think there's some static too many picks, too many problems sort of thing. That's a first world rookie draft problems thing of too many picks because it's free roster spots would be my last little soapbox pitch there. I mean,
absolutely.
You have a finite amount of roster spots, but you know what? You can have as many 2023 second round picks as there are in the draft because it counts for nothing.
Yep. That's 100% right.
All right. In this episode, we discussed a lot about the shark pool and those thoughts going on there. We talked a lot about FFPC and other drafts going on in the Dynasty space. Submit those deals if you want to be included for conversation here. That's the Shark Pool Dynasty completed trades thread that I go through each and every week. We also talked about the Jalen Wentz. Wow.
Nice.
Jalen Hurts. How many quarterbacks? We'll keep a running tab of how many quarterback names I mix up, doing a grab bag of pronunciations there. Jalen Hurts, especially in Superflex valuation, and a little bit on Carson Wentz there at the beginning of the show as well. So for Jordan McNamara at McNamara Dynasty, I am at Chad Parsons NFL. And until next week, good luck in your Dynasty leagues.